Good morning. How are y'all doing? Amazing. So we're going to get started. I don't think we have any new, that's not true at all. We have a new song. It's at the very end, though. So go ahead and stand with us if you would, and we're going to get started. Please feel free to sing beyond your mask limitation. Hum so we can hear, whatever suits your fancy. you ever seen the wonder and the glimmer of her sight as the eyes began to open and the blindness meets the light? If you have so say, I see the world in light. I see the world in wonder. I see the world in light. Bursting in living color. I see the world your way. I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the world?
Good morning, everybody. How's it going? You can be seated. We got an awkward mic situation. There we go. Cool. You may have noticed Hannah's mic is like broken, and I just tried to ignore it for 3 weeks, and I don't know. Maybe we'll fix it next week. How you guys doing? Did you see that Dave was playing with no shoes on? Is that a normal thing? Sorta? Cool. I never noticed before, and I was just like, that's cool. We had a new guy today. Everybody say hi, Lyndon. He's there. Oh, he's right there, right on cue. I think it's cool because he looks like Josiah, but Josiah's not here today, so whatever. That's actually really cool. Hannah and Josiah are on vacation. If you don't know, Hannah is our pastor. She's the coolest. And there's also Josiah. Anyway, they're on vacation today, and they're on vacation next week. I don't know when the last time is that they took time off. So it's like their first official time off in forever. And she quit her job yesterday. Yeah. So when she comes back, she's like officially ours. So that's super cool. Okay, everybody, do me a favor. Take your phone out. Go to diff.church on your browser. You don't have to do .com or anything. And there's a couple things on that have actually changed. So even if you've done it before, you should go, diff.church. It looks something like that. That's the best way to connect with us. If it's your first time here, just click the I'm new. Let us know what we're doing that you really love, what you'd like to see less of, maybe less hilarious jokes here. I don't know. You can jump on our mailing list, which would be a really good idea because next week we are changing our mask guidelines. And I'm not going to tell you what they are because I want you to sign up for the mailing list. But also, I'll forget. So sign up there, and we will email you and let you know how things are going to be changing next week. Also, while you're there, towards the bottom, it's not on the screen, but I added a new button. You can sign up for our Slack, and that's a really cool way to stay connected. There's like a service channel. There's all sorts of ways to stay connected throughout the week. Speaking of being connected, after church today, we are doing Sunday social brunch. I am leading the charge. I'm just going to leave immediately. And I'm going to say, band, you're on your own. I'll come back. We're going to Job Site Burgers. It's right over here. So if you want to go, just come find me, and we'll go to brunch together or meet me there. I think that's everything. The only other thing that I haven't mentioned yet is since Hannah's not here, we have a super awesome guest speaker. We thought that it would be really cool to like fly in somebody national who's like really famous and like pay them a bunch of money, but everybody said no. So we have Shannon, who's like our very own, and she's really cool. So Shannon, go ahead and come on up. Let's give her a huge hand. I'm really excited to hear her today. You can't possibly do any worse than what I just did. And see, here's the mic situation I was telling you about. You ready? Here we go.
Awesome. 10 out of 10. All right, and I'm just going to unclip it because I'm not going to keep it there. I walk too much. So hi, guys. I'm Shannon. I'm usually working over in the nursery. You might see me when you get to like drop off your kids and be like, yes, I have an hour just to go into church and enjoy it. But you might also recognize me from, I usually have my service dog with me. She requested not to be here today because she has horrible stage fright. So she is at home napping, which is her favorite activity other than maybe getting pet by strangers. But I am definitely not a pastor. I am kind of the complete opposite. I sit behind a computer every day, and I am a data analyst. So what that means is people give me a whole bunch of information, I type it into a computer program, and it spits out like really cool visualizations and pictures. And so the presentations that I normally give at work are incredibly boring. And so I am trying my best to make it not sound like I'm giving a boring visualization, like demonstration, like this is how much the growth is, this is how much this is. I'm just gonna go ahead and talk through. And when I was practicing with my husband, who's not here right now, I think last time I was on stage doing announcements, he was also deployed, but he's down in Puerto Rico on deployment. All I get is pictures of him at the beach, so I don't really know what he's doing. But he's not here today. But when I sent him a recording, he's like, it sounds like you're giving a TED Talk. And I'm like, well, that's my dream. I want to give it, that's like my #1 dream, but it's not exactly a sermon. So I'm going to try my best to sound as authentic as possible. But if I start sounding like a little robot, you can just wave at me and be like, yo, make it more personal, please. But today we're going to talk about something that's actually really important to me. Hannah gave me the prompt of finding a verse or finding some place in the Bible that really resonates with me in my faith. And so today we're going to be reflecting through Romans 5 And we're going to look at two different translations of these verses in Romans 5. I'm kind of a translation nerd. I really like to pull up as many as I can and see which one I like the best, compare and contrast between the two of them, and I found two that are really great. And so the reason we're going to be focusing in Romans 5 is because it has had this major impact, not only on how I think about the church, but how I view myself, how I view the people around me, and how I view God, and how I think that God views me. And so Romans 5 breaks down our relationship with God and our relationship with God's grace. And it's at the center of this concept in Christian theology called the original grace. The original grace is a commentary, some might even call it a contradiction, to the idea of original sin. Now, as a lot of you may know, growing up maybe in more traditional churches or being in the faith for a long time, the concept and the doctrine of original sin. But if you're newer to the faith and you haven't heard of what this doctrine is, I'm going to give you just a small overview. Original sin is a Christian doctrine that says that everybody is born sinful. It means that you're born with the built-in urge to do bad things and to disobey God. Original sin is considered to be the result of the actions of Adam and Eve. So what happened in Genesis 3, Adam and Eve are in the garden, they eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they get kicked out of the garden, and they're pretty much sentenced to death and sentenced to this original sin of always just inherently leaning towards and doing bad things. Now, sin is very difficult for me to talk about, just in the sense of the word sin and the word sinner have been used as weapons against people within the church and outside of the church walls. A lot of churches use this as a way to gain power over people, or a lot of churches use this in order to keep people from coming in the doors. So I've always felt really uncomfortable talking about it because it's been used against me to keep me out of churches. And so when I was praying about this sermon, and I was like, yay, God, what am I going to talk about? He's like, sin. He's like, you're going to talk about sin, but you're also going to talk about grace. And I'm like, oh, what? I don't really understand that because I never really had that full concept of what grace was until a few years ago when I learned about this concept of original grace. And a lot of you have also probably been taught, even from a young age, like even going to like a nursery class, maybe at a more traditional church, that you were born a sinner due to these actions of Adam and Eve. That you were born bad, that you have the inclination inside of you to be bad, and that even if you're saved and you work really hard, you're still labeled a sinner because of what Adam and Eve did. That's a really heavy topic to explain to a 5-year-old. It's a really heavy topic to explain to somebody who's an adult coming into the church. And it's extremely disheartening to learn that you have no chance, that you have no choice, but you were born this way and you will stay this way until you die. And that even when you're taught about this amazing concept of Jesus dying on the cross and redeeming you, people within the church will still turn to you on a weekly basis and call you a sinner. Or maybe not say it to your face, but say it behind your back, which can be even more hurtful. And over time, this can cause major issues with self-worth, and it can cause major issues with how you start to view others. When I learned this, I grew up in a very small Baptist church. Eventually, when I was a teenager, I moved into mega churches because that's when mega churches were getting really cool, and went to an event there, and I was like, this is great. And eventually ended up working at that mega church. I was still continually told these things throughout that. And it caused a lot of self-hate, and it caused a lot of fear within me. I was struggling with a lot of things, especially when this concept was really being dug into me around college. I was struggling with depression. I was struggling with anxiety. But I was also struggling with the fact that I was queer. How does that fit in? If I'm inherently born bad, does that mean that that's bad too? And it's because from the time that I was small, I was given the idea that my foundation, the thing that made me, my soul, was born to do bad things. And I just had to work really hard not to do that. And then I was angry because the reason for this was a man thousands of years ago made a mistake and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I was like, this just isn't fair. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. The God that I think that I know wouldn't do that. But it was even more than that. Because at the same time that I was being told that I was a sinner, I was also being told that I was born in the perfect image of God. And that's an incredible contradiction. How can I be in God's image, his perfect creation, fearfully and wonderfully made, but also a horrible sinner that just wanted to do bad things all the time? So I personally always defaulted back to the negatives about myself and about others due to that main foundation of me being taught was original sin. That concept was an excuse for me to treat people badly because not only was my foundation bad, but everybody's foundation was bad. So if they treated me badly, there was no reason, or if I treated someone else badly, there was no reason to have accountability because, I'm just going to stay bad. There's no way that I can improve upon this. Or when something good happened, I wasn't fully able to embrace the happiness and the joy of that positive event. Whether it was going to college or grad school or getting married or just any of these life-altering, amazing times, I still had this inner thought of, I can't celebrate this. I can't be happy about this because I'm not good enough. I haven't earned that. I'm still bad. And it's not something that I personally think, after studying this concept for a while, it's biblical. And I want to challenge the concept of original sin as it is now. So I'm going to have us read together through a portion of Romans 5:15 through 18. If you want to find that in your Bible or your Bible app, go for it. I'll give you guys a moment, and I'm going to give a little bit of a background about what Romans is. If not, that's totally fine. I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. But I'm going to give you two different translations of this. The first translation we're going to go through is the New International Version. I did this translation because it's kind of one of the most common ones found in the Bible, so you might be able to match it up in your own Bible or Bible app. But my favorite translation of it is in the Passion Translation, and we're going to do that one second. So the Passion Translation is a lot more poetic, and it really goes towards what the true message of these verses are. But as a little background, it was authored by Paul when he was in Corinth in the mid-50s AD. So it's about 50 years after Jesus' death, and Paul is on his third missionary trip. And so he's sending out letters to his followers, and this is the first and the only letter, you can quiz me on that later, I'll double check, but the only letter that he sends out to a group of people that he's never met before. So he sends this letter out to Rome, never met these people before, and he wouldn't meet them for another 3 years. So he needed to make sure that this had all the basics, all the most important parts of Christianity in it, so that they could have their church run for the next 3 years until he was able to see them. So I like this a lot because it's just the basics. It's what Paul is thinking is the most important thing. So if we look at Romans 5:15 through 18, New International Version, it says, "But the gift is not like the trespass. For if the many died by the trespass of one man, how much more did God's grace and the gift that came by the grace of one man, Jesus Christ, overflow to the many? Nor can the gift of God be compared with the result of one man's sin. The judgment followed one sin and brought condemnation, but the gift followed many trespasses and brought justification. For if by the trespass of one man death reigned through that one man, how much more will those who receive God's abundant provision of grace and that gift of righteousness reign in life through one man, Jesus Christ? Consequently, just as one trespass resulted in the condemnation for all people, so also one righteous act resulted in the justification and life for all people. Now, I said before, it's a little bit clunky and repetitive, but in the Passion Version, it goes like this. Now, there's no comparison between Adam's transgression and the gracious gift that we experience. For the magnitude of the gift far outweighs the crime. It's true that many died because of this transgression, but how much greater will God's grace and his gracious gift of acceptance overflow to the many because of what one man, Jesus, the Messiah, did for us? And I really love that part that's up there that says, for the magnitude of the gift far outweighs the crime. When I found that, it kind of made me tear up a little bit. Kind of made me realize through preparing for this, but also through a few years of deconstructing my faith, just what the meaning of this passage really was. And the gift that Paul is talking about is the grace of God. Paul's point is simply this: whatever came upon the world or would come upon the world, humanity, from the moment that you are born, as a result of Adam's sin, has been removed completely. And from the saving grace of Jesus dying and the universal gift of saving grace. And when you dig a little bit more through Romans, you're able to see that this grace is not just offered to saved Christians. This grace is not just offered to Christians. It is able to go to any race, any religion, any location. This grace is offered to everybody from the moment that they are born. This isn't something that you have to earn. This isn't something that you have to pray for. This is something that you're given. It is your birthright. And what was so cool to me in digging into these verses in Romans as well was that this gift transcended time. So it wasn't just, okay, everybody after Jesus died, they're good. They got the grace. This grace went all the way back to the time of Adam and Eve and was reflected on all of those people. Jesus didn't care about time. He's like, I invented that. I'm not going to deal with that. He's like, everybody gets this grace and everybody's saved. And so original grace is that idea that with Jesus coming down to die for us, he took away that concept of being born in sin, and sin is our first and major inclination. Now, this doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we don't hurt people or say hurtful things. And it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't be held accountable for those actions. What this means is that God's grace is bigger than anything we have done, anything we are doing, or anything that we will do. And it means that we're not marked with death from the time that we are born, but instead we're marked with love and with grace. Now just take a moment to think about that. When I first was told this concept by a friend that I trust very much who actually recommended me to different church. Her name is Melissa. She's a friend of Hannah's. I was really taken back because I was almost offended. I was like, what? How dare you tell me that I'm a good person? Like, how dare you give me the concept that, I was born, not bad, but I was born good because I've spent, 20-something years of my life believing this concept of the original badness to me. And it took me a few days to comprehend the meaning of what original grace was. And when I was fully able to chew down on that concept, it completely changed my entire faith. I was able to deconstruct that idea that no matter what, I was always going to do bad things. And instead, I was able to dig into the Bible and understand that true love, grace, and compassion was the plan that God had for me. And it also forced me to think about the way that I was treating others. Because I was not dealing with inherently bad people. I was dealing with children of God. Every day I was spending my experiences with people who were just as treasured and just as loved, and people who accepted the same amount of grace that I was. And it gave me the courage to look at myself and build my relationship with God because I wanted to, not because I was afraid to. It's a concept that goes along with original sin that is, hey, you need to continually just be observing yourself all the time for all the sin that you're doing. And it creates these negative thought patterns within your mind and over-analyzing yourself, and it's past the point of self-improvement where you're like, okay, I want to work on this thing about myself, I'm going to be more aware, but it creates these negative cycles of thoughts. And in that, it can create a real fear of the faith because you feel like you're not owning up, or you feel like you're not doing enough, or you feel like even when you do enough, it's not the best. But when you're able to look at the fact that God created you in love and grace and you weren't created as a sinner, it changed the way that I thought that God looked at me. Because God looked at me with love. God looked at me with respect. God looked at me with a forgiving heart. Why couldn't I look at myself that way? He wasn't this scary figure in the sky that was going to spite me if I eventually did the worst thing, whatever that may be, showing up to church late. I don't know what the worst thing was. But I wasn't going to be spited. Instead, God was going to look down on me and be like, everybody goes to church late. You're good. Makes you look cool. But it just changed the way and the closeness that I wanted to have to God, because there wasn't this foundation of fear. It was a foundation of curiosity and a foundation of love. And on top of that, I was able to fully allow myself to experience joy and happiness in my life. It took time to deconstruct the idea that I needed to suffer in order to feel joy. It's another concept that's normally taught to us, and it's not inherently wrong. We will have joy within suffering. It's talked about a lot in the Bible. And we have experienced that, most of us, in our real lives, having good things come out of bad things. But the way that it was taught to me growing up was, you're a sinner, you're born that way, so you're going to suffer forever. And you might get some joy every once in a while as like God being like, you were good enough for now. Here's a little sprinkle of joy. And so I always thought, like, man, if I was happy outside of the fact that I was suffering, like, that's wrong. Because I grew up in that cycle. And so when I was able to deconstruct that idea and think about the fact that God created me to have good experiences, God created me to be happy, it gave me the option to really just sit down in those moments of joy and happiness in my life. When I got married, when I graduated, when we moved to Tampa and it was sunny all the time, like, that's awesome. I just want to be happy with that, right? And I was able to actually sit in that joy. And that was really uncomfortable at first because, like I said, it was always connected to suffering. I was like, oh, when's the other shoe going to drop? But when you're able to sit not just with suffering, which is a very good thing to do as well, to process your emotions, but to sit with those happy times in your life and to really embrace that, it gives you the ability to see what God has for you. So if we think about this mindset of original grace, it can change the way that we think about not just ourselves, but the people around us, and them being in a never-ending grace. And we're able to think about all of those beautiful verses within the Bible, all over the Bible, that talk about the real feelings of God and what he calls us. I'm going to come on over to Jesus, because I always think about them, in the Trinity all separate. So I think Jesus is like my cool brother, right? Like I could actually sit down and talk to him. Like when I did something bad, I'm like, yo, Jesus, I need some help. But like when I need like a big miracle, I'm like, sup, God, you're the one with all magic powers. So, but if we go ahead and look at Jesus, because we actually have his words in the Gospels. I went through, it's a rather tedious task, but I went through all of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and looked up in that red text, so the actual words of Jesus, how many times he says the word sinner. He says sinner 16 times in all of the Gospels. And in fact, in the Gospel of John, he says it 0 times. And remember, the Gospels are pretty much retelling the same event of Jesus' life over and over. And so John didn't think any time that he said sinner was important. But the most important part about these 16 times is that he never once pointed at somebody and said, you're the sinner. You're doing bad things. Instead, it was always a response to a question somebody asked him about sin. So he used the word sinner as kind of like, all right, well, you said this in your question, so I'm going to say it in my answer. Or he used it as a way to form equality with himself. I'm the friend of sinners. They're my buds. Like, I like chilling with them. He never once said any words of condemnation when it came to the word sinner at all. And in fact, Jesus calls us children in some aspect, whether that be children of the kingdom, children of the Most High, or just the word children, 27 times in the Gospels, which is over twice as many times as he says sinner. And that's actually calling us something. That's actually giving us that name, that title. He also calls us beloved, friend, blessed, redeemed, whole, mother, brother, sister, and mine. So I want you to do an exercise for me. I want you to imagine, you don't have to close your eyes, but if you want to, you can. I want you to imagine when you first came to the faith, whether that be when you were really young, and you can't really imagine, but you can try your best, into your adulthood, or if it was really recently. And I want you to imagine that the main concept that you were taught was of original grace. You were taught that you were born with the names that God calls us: friend, masterpiece, treasure, beloved. You were taught that you're going to make mistakes, but the grace of God is so much bigger. These mistakes don't define you. They don't mark you, and you weren't made to do them. And that never once were you given the title of sinner. So in these last few moments, I'm going to have the band come back up. I'm going to move this back over here so that she actually has a place to sing. But as the band comes back up, I'm going to give them a moment, kind of surprise them. I'm going to say some words that I would like you to reflect on as we go through worship. And these words are your name in God's eyes, because your name in God's eyes is not sinner or mistake or unwelcome. So as the band starts, I want you to think about these words. And they might be different. I put them on the slideshow, but I think I chose some different ones so you guys don't have to put them up. These words are chosen, loved, friend, masterpiece, beloved, and very good. And as you go into your week, I want you to reflect on those names and really take them as your identity. Take away the thought that you are a sinner. Completely throw that out the door because it's false. It's wrong. And take on those names. I'm going to say them one more time, and then I'm going to come back and do a benediction. Chosen, loved, friend, masterpiece, beloved, and very good.
Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount I'm fixed upon it, the mount of God's unchanging love. Here I raise my Ebenezer, hither by thy help I've come, and I hope by thy good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Jesus sought me when a stranger, wandering from the fold of God. He to rescue me from danger interposed his precious blood. Daily I'm constrained to be. Let thy grace now like a fetter bind my wandering heart to thee. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, oh, take and seal it for thy courts above. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. Here's my heart, take and seal it for thy courts above. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune my heart to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy mercy never ceasing. Call for songs of loudest praise. Teach me some melodious sonnet, sung by flaming tongues above. Praise the mount time fixed upon it, mount of God's unchanging love.
So before we begin the last one, I just want to share that normally at Different Church, we really enjoy exploring songs that you don't typically hear in other churches. But we're gonna, this is the first of one that we've got today that's actually under the hymn category. We've done Come Thou Font before, but this last one is the first time that we're doing it. It's called It Is Well. So feel free to stand or sit because it's pretty chill for the first half. Grandeur has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice. Seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. And through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well. It is well. So let go my soul and trust in him. The waves and wind still know his name. So let go my soul and trust in him. The waves and wind still know his name. So let go my soul and trust in him. The waves and wind still know his name. The waves and wind still know his name. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul.
So that is by far my favorite hymn, and this is my favorite version I've ever heard of it. So great job, guys. So I'm actually going to give a little bit of a background behind this hymn and the story that's behind it. So the man who wrote this, I'm just going to say his last name because I'm going to butcher his first name, but Spafford, he was a church elder and a lawyer back in the 1800s. And this hymn was written after some traumatic events in his life. The first two, there's three of them, were the death of his 4-year-old in the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. And in that Chicago fire, the second one was that it completely ruined him financially. He invested in Chicago, and all of it was gone. So at that point, they decided to go back to England, and that he was going to do preaching and things over in England. And so he sent his wife and 4 daughters over first in order to make sure that he could finish up all of his business ties there. And while doing that, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, the ship sank. And he lost all 4 of his daughters. And so his wife, Anna, survived and sent him a now famous telegram entitled Saved Alone. And so he wrote this along with other things as he was on that boat, on another boat crossing the Atlantic to meet his wife, and wrote it when he was passing the exact place that his daughters had died. And so I think it's a really deep song when you look at it that way, but it's also such a way to look at how much we can lean on God and how much we can really look at it into ourselves in this relationship and take it for the great gift that it can be in those really difficult times. So our benediction today is just going to be another verse from Romans that I really enjoy. And then I have one small announcement afterwards. So this is Romans 8:38 through 39. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. All right, so transitioning, real quick transition. We need volunteers for Pride. Yay! I know, kind of a quick, big transition over. But we need volunteers for all 4 weekends, right, Jarrett? Okay, so St. Pete Pride is going to be all June long. You can go onto their website. They have really cool themes. But different church is going to have a booth there. I'll be there the first weekend, bright and early at 7 a.m. So I took that spot so you guys don't have to. But we also get these really awesome tie-dye different church shirts, so that could convince you too. But it's going to be a really fun event. We get to just kind of be there and show people that, you know, Jesus isn't in this box that the Christian church has put him in, and that we're there and available, and if they want to talk about it, they can get information, and it's just a cool place to be. Pride is awesome. There was Pride yesterday, if you guys went, and it was freaking fantastic. So if you want to do that, you can go online. Same place where you can do the volunteer stuff. There's information on there as well. Correct, Jared, to be able to do it? Perfect. Just go to diff.church and you'll be able to find all that information on there. And I hope that there's someone else that comes at 7 a.m. to help me. So I'm searching for you guys. All right. Thank you guys so much.